it's about as depraved and just awful as anything in our lifetimes, to be quite honest with you.
In a video posted to social media on Monday, IDF soldiers can be heard as they watch as they level a building in Gaza as part of a gender reveal celebration. That's like, you can't make this stuff up. Besides the video and the apparent gender of the baby, not much is known about this incident, including if there were any injuries or casualties. But still, it goes to show how the IDF, they say that they're the most moral army in the world, but this is the level of inhumanity that we're seeing with this war. So according to Heidi Matthews, a law professor at York University in Toronto, we have reached the stage of genocidal fervor where new Israeli life is literally celebrated through the destruction of Palestinian life. The Council of American Islamic Relations, which is the US largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, also condemned the event, saying in a statement, while the Israeli government slaughters and starves Palestinian babies in Gaza with the full support of our own government, its occupation forces are now blowing up buildings to stage gender reveal events in celebration of the birth of their own children. The inhumanity of such acts clearly demonstrates once again the brutal nature of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza and on the Palestinian people. The Israeli government must be stopped. So far, the Gaza Health Ministry has reported that the death toll in Gaza has gone past 52,000, and that number is probably much higher than what we know. And that includes at least 17,400 children. And since it broke the ceasefire agreement in March, more than 800 children have been killed. So this is from, so 5 out of every 100 children in the enclave have been orphaned. And Israel's bombardment has left Gaza with the highest number of child amputees in the world and with dwindling capacity to care for them as repeated bombings and the blockade have led to a near total collapse of the healthcare system. But again, this is the most moral army in the world, or that's what they keep telling us. But I feel like if they actually were, they wouldn't have to keep telling us. Also, what does that even mean, a moral army? So, but remember when Bibi said this, but way back at the beginning of the war, he said the army is the most moral army in the world. Any civilian death is a tragedy, and we shouldn't have any because we're doing everything we can to get the civilians out of harm's way. That's what we're trying to do, minimize civilian casualties. Well, they haven't been doing a great job of it. And just the fact that they're so liberal with these bombings, that they're using it as a gender reveal, just the thought, how does one come to that idea? Who says, you know what? Let's do a gender reveal. First of all, the worst, right? Already the worst. Second of all, how does that even enter your thought? Let's do it by bombing Palestine. Let's do it by bombing the places where people live. Let's do it by potentially killing other people while celebrating this pregnancy that we're having here. And congratulations on the pregnancy, I get, but this is so, how can you feel happy for somebody when this is how they choose to bring that life into the world? Also, you talk about how many of these children have not only been killed, but they've been orphaned or they've been disabled and dismembered. This is a generation that is being destroyed, an entire generation of children who are gonna grow up with all of these disabilities, who are gonna grow up with all of this instability, who are gonna grow up without families, who may not even get to grow up. We'll see how things play out. But this is really, really upsetting. Waz, what do you think?
So after the Hamas attacks on October 7th, I think, with some credibility, the Israeli regime could be like, you know what, we're going in there, we're gonna level the place, we're gonna send ground troops, we're gonna drive Hamas out of Palestine, victory is going to be ours, blah, blah, blah. They could say they could say that. After a year and change of nonstop, indiscriminate bombing, a complete siege, leveling the place, insane amounts of civilian casualties, the mission hasn't been accomplished. Hamas isn't going anywhere. The more you bomb, that it's not going to change that fact. And so now, after a ceasefire is negotiated, it's like, all right, let's negotiate. Since we haven't been able to drive you out ourselves. All right, cool. Since you cannot do that via military tactics, the logical thing is to come to a peace agreement because you clearly don't have the capacity to do it any other way, or else you would have, because that was your stated goal. You have not been able to do that. Now, when you're bombing people, we know that there's no mission. There's no point to it. The point is the cruelty and the destruction in and of itself, which is so depraved, which is so dehumanizing. It's just manifest and obvious. Okay, like you can't point to like an accomplishment here. And so that's why you get to the level of depravity where it's like, obviously, we're not achieving any level of military or political aim. We're just trying to inflict pain on as many Palestinians as we can. And now we get to have fun with it, or what we call fun, by doing gender reveals with it. I mean, it's about as depraved and just awful as anything in our lifetimes, to be quite honest with you. I don't even know where a precedent comes. And a lot of times when you hear folks on the pro Israel side of things talking about Hamas and their terrorists and their depraved, like, what is that besides an act of terrorism?
Mhm.
Like, what does the word terrorism even mean these days? When you can basically indiscriminately kill 50,000, civilian people over the course of your war and never have to explain why that was worth what you did. Never have to show any level of, all right, this advanced some claim or some cause. Like, I honestly really do want to ask these people, like when Al Qaeda and Osama was like, listen, the CIA, who inflicted all kinds of pain and terror in our part of the world, were housed in the Twin Towers. We took down the Twin Towers on September 11th, therefore it's justified. The CIA is a military entity. We're at war with them. 9/11 is justified. Nobody would agree with that logic,
Mhm.
except for only when it applies to the Israelis.
Mhm. It is, it is interesting because, like this government and this military, and we have to take responsibility here because the United States is still funding the Israeli army and we're still giving them weaponry and we're still saying everything you're doing is fine, right? At most, Joe Biden said, I asked him not to do this, right? Obviously that's not enough, right? If people are dying, but like if you're going to tell someone who's dying from all of this, say, oh, well, at least I told them this wasn't a good idea. That doesn't do any good, right? And we do have to accept responsibility that our government is funding all this stuff and is behind all of it, but also there's a culture behind it too, right? And we did see it with 9/11. And that's why October 7th drew so many comparisons almost immediately to 9/11. And I was actually personally surprised to see that because a lot of Americans still don't talk about why we were attacked on September 11th the way that we were. They don't talk about how on that day in 2001, so many Americans genuinely were heartbroken, of course, but were also just confused as to why any of this happened. Nobody knew why any of this happened because we had no idea what our government was doing and what our military was doing in the Middle East at the time. So much so that, all the things that we were doing over there that would upset them so much that they would want to attack us the way that they did. But the president just said, you know what? They hate us for our freedom. They're jealous of us, basically, is what he told us. And we bought it because we didn't know any better. But now, 20 years later, we're seeing kind of the same playbook rolled out and people are falling for it again. And to your earlier point was, maybe right after October 7th, they could have used that excuse that, you know what, we have to defend ourselves, we have to retaliate, we have to do something, blah, blah, blah. And, however you feel about that argument is how you feel about it. But that was only plausible. Like, there's no way they can stand by something like that now, right? After we've seen everything, but now we're seeing that they really are just frivolously bombing places and historical places and entire families and schools and hospitals. It's getting really, really hard for them to hide behind that facade of, you know what, this is just self defense. We have to get these people out. No, you're doing gender reveals with like money and bombs and weaponry that you got from the American people. So I hated covering this story. I'll say that. So this was a hard one.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.